The spaceship floated quietly between the stars. It was a special ship that belonged to both humans and the Velkari people. Inside the ship, a human officer named Doyen stood near a large window. He watched the beautiful colors of space outside. His uniform sleeves were rolled down, covering his arms completely. A small voice spoke behind him. Doyen turned around and saw a young Velkari child standing there. Her name was Rila. She was very small, only reaching up to his waist. Her skin was see-through and glowed with soft light. The Velkari people were peaceful. They came from a safe planet where nothing dangerous ever lived. Doyen bent down so he could look at Rila eye to eye. He smiled at her. The Velkari were kind and gentle, and he liked talking to them. Rila's skin changed colors when she felt different things. Right now it showed orange light, which meant she was curious about something. Rila told Doyen that she had learned about human bodies in school today. Her teacher, a human woman named Myra, had shown the class pictures of human skin. Rila explained that human skin was thicker than Velkari skin. It had more layers and protected humans better. But the pictures showed something strange. Many humans had marks on their skin, lines and circles and other shapes. Doyen listened carefully. He knew what Rila was talking about. His smile became smaller. Rila stepped closer to him. She spoke softly, like she was sharing a secret. She said that teacher Myra called these marks scars. The teacher said that scars came from being hurt. Rila looked up at Doyen with her bright eyes. Then Rila asked her question. She wanted to know what was under his sleeves. The question hung in the air between them. Doyen looked at the innocent child. She was just curious. She did not mean anything bad by asking. Around them, the stars kept moving in their endless dance through space. Doyen stood up slowly. His hands moved to his shirt cuffs. He asked Rila if the pictures Myra showed them had scared her. Rila said no. Her skin changed to soft blue, which meant she felt sad. She explained that injury was very rare for Velkari people. They had good medical tools. When Velkari got hurt, their skin healed without leaving any marks. But humans were different. Teacher Myra had said that humans carried their past on their bodies. Doyen agreed. Myra was right about that. He started rolling up his left sleeve. He told Rila that what was under his sleeves was not just skin. It was a story. Actually, it was many stories. The cloth moved up past his hand, past his wrist. His arm appeared. It was covered with pale lines and dark marks. One long scar ran from his wrist toward his elbow. Smaller scars crossed his arm like old roads on a map. Near his inner elbow was a round mark, shiny and raised. Rila's skin started glowing with a color Doyen had never seen before. It was somewhere between gray and deep purple. She whispered that there were so many scars. Doyen told her that each one was different. He pointed to the long scar. He got that one when he was 12 years old. He had been climbing a tree and fell down. His arm broke. The doctors had to do surgery. The surgery left this scar behind. Rila asked if human medical tools could not stop the scar from forming. Doyen explained that back then, the tools were not good enough. Maybe if he got the surgery now, there would be no scar. But he did not mind having it. The scar reminded him of summer days and the smell of oak tree leaves. He touched another mark on his arm. This one came from a cooking accident when he was 19. Hot oil had burned him. Rila said something that was not a question. She said the scars had hurt him. Doyen agreed. Yes, they had hurt, but he had survived them. That was what these marks meant, survival. From across the room, two more people appeared. One was Myra, the teacher. The other was Captain Jihoon, who was in charge of the whole ship. Jihoon's face showed no feelings, but Myra's eyes showed that she understood what was happening. Myra called to Rila gently. She said it was time for the child to go rest. Rila looked back and forth between Doyen's arm and her teacher. Her skin colors swirled, showing she did not want to leave. She said that Doyen had been showing her his stories. Myra said she knew, but Doyen would still be there tomorrow, and he had many more stories to share. After Rila left with Myra, Jihoon walked over to Doyen. The captain was an older man who had seen many hard things in his life. His hair was gray at the sides. His eyes carried heavy memories. He spoke quietly. He asked Doyen if he knew what he was starting. Doyen looked down at his left arm. Then he slowly rolled up his right sleeve too. The scars on this arm were different. They looked more deliberate. There was a mark from a blade that had almost killed him during a big fight at a place called Outpost 7. There was a burn pattern from plasma fire that had killed 3 members of his squad. There was a puncture scar from an emergency spike that had saved his life, but had gone all the way through his arm. Doyen said that Rila had asked what was under his sleeves. He had told her the truth. These scars were every fight he had survived. If humans and Velkhari were going to have a real friendship, the Velkhari needed to understand what humanity really was. Not a cleaned-up version, the real one. Jihoon was quiet for a long time. Then he said that the Velkhari had never known war. They did not understand fighting beyond talking about it in theory. When they saw these marks, they would not just see survival, they would see violence. Doyen replied that then they would see the truth. Humans were violent. Humans fought. They got hurt. They broke. But they also healed, adapted, and survived. These scars were not just wounds. They were proof that humans did not give up. The colorful nebula outside pulsed with stellar wind. Its colors shifted like Rila's skin. Jihoon put his hand on Doyen's shoulder. He said that tomorrow Rila would come back with more questions. Doyen said he knew. Jihoon said that Doyen would answer them. Doyen agreed. He would answer everyone. Doyen looked out at the stars. He said that the Velkhari thought humanity was just another peaceful species ready to join the cosmic community. But humans were not peaceful in that way. Humans were scarred, broken, rebuilt, and still standing. If this alliance was going to work, the Velkhari needed to understand that. All of it. Jihoon nodded slowly. He said they had better prepare then. Because once Doyen opened this door, there would be no closing it. Doyen said good. It had been closed long enough. As the 2 humans stood by the window, surrounded by the dark of space and distant stars, they did not see the small figure watching from the hallway. Rila had not gone to her room after all. She had hidden just outside the doorway. Her young mind was racing with questions. Her skin flickered through colors she had never shown before. Tomorrow, she decided, she would ask Doyen about every single mark on his skin, and then she would ask him why humans chose to survive instead of simply staying away from danger. It was, she suspected, a very important question. The next morning, Rila came back just like she said she would, but she did not come alone. She brought her whole class with her. Doyen had been looking at supply lists in the eating area when the door opened. Rila walked in first, followed by 7 more Velkhari children. They were all young, between 6 and 10 years old in human terms. Behind them stood Myra. Her face showed she was sorry but also encouraging. Myra said she could not stop them. Rila had told her classmates about the conversation yesterday. Now all of them wanted to hear his stories. The Velkhari children formed a half-circle around Doyen's table. Their skin glowed with colors that showed they were curious and excited. Rila stepped forward. She seemed to be speaking for all of them. Rila spoke formally. She said they wished to learn about human survival. Would he teach them? Doyen looked at Myra. She gave him a small nod. He put away his computer pad and rolled up both of his sleeves. Now all the children could see the scars on both of his arms. Doyen said all right. But first they needed to understand something. These marks were not badges of honor. He was not proud of collecting them. Each scar was a moment when something went wrong. A moment when he failed to avoid danger, or when danger found him anyway. A child named Vex spoke up. His skin showed confusion. He asked why Doyen would show them if they were failures. Why not hide them? Doyen explained that the scars were also proof that he did not give up. He pointed to the round burn scar near his elbow. He got this when he was 23 years old. He was working on a mining station at the edge of human space. There was an accident. A coolant line broke in the refinery section. The children leaned closer. Their lights dimmed as they focused on listening. Doyen continued his story. The temperature in that section dropped to -100 degrees very fast. 3 workers were trapped inside. Doyen was the closest person who could help. He grabbed an emergency suit, but it was damaged. He did not notice until he was already inside the cold room. Rila said softly that he went in anyway. Doyen confirmed this. He was already inside. Going back would waste time that those workers did not have. The cold got through the hole in his suit right at this spot. He touched the scar. Cold could burn just like heat could burn. but he managed to seal the coolant line and help get the trapped workers out. A child named Mora asked if they survived. Her skin swirled with worry. Doyen paused. 2 of them survived. The third had been exposed to the cold for too long. They got him out, but the cold had damaged his organs too much. He died 3 days later. All the children's skin changed to deep blue. That was the Velkari color for sadness. Vex spoke slowly. He said this scar represented both success and failure. Doyen agreed. It represented reality. Sometimes you did everything right, and people still died. Sometimes you made mistakes and everyone survived. The universe did not care about being fair. It just existed. At that moment, another human officer entered the eating area. His name was Tae-hyun. He was a security officer who had served with Doyen during something called the Mars Reconstruction. He stopped when he saw the group. His own arms had similar scars. He asked if he was interrupting a class. Rila explained that Doyen was teaching them about survival. Tae-hyun looked at Doyen. A silent question passed between them. Doyen nodded slightly. Understanding what Doyen meant, Tae-hyun rolled up his own sleeves and joined the circle. He said that if they wanted to understand human survival, they needed to hear more than one story. Everyone's scars were different, because everyone's battles were different. Tae-hyun held out his right arm. A jagged scar ran from his wrist almost to his shoulder. The tissue was thick and bumpy. He said this happened during the Dome 6 collapse on Mars. He was trapped under broken pieces of the building for 16 hours. A support beam had pinned his arm down. The Velkari children stared at the massive scar with horror. Tae-hyun continued calmly. He had a choice. He could wait for rescue, but the dome's air was leaking out. He would die from lack of air before help arrived. Or he could free himself. Mora whispered, asking how. Tae-hyun explained that the beam had crushed his arm so badly that the bone was already broken into pieces. He used a piece of debris to separate the arm from the beam. Then he used a plasma cutter to seal the wound. After that, he made his way to the emergency shelter. Several of the children's skin turned white with shock. For Velkari people, hurting yourself on purpose was almost impossible to imagine. Their bodies were designed to stop them from harming themselves. Vex's voice was barely heard. He asked if Tae-hyun had cut off his own arm. Tae-hyun said only part of it. And later, human medical technology grew most of the tissue back. This scar was what remained. It reminded him that survival sometimes required sacrifice, and that humans could override their own pain when necessary. Rila's skin swirled with distress. She asked why. Why would human bodies allow such pain? Why would human minds let them do such things? Myra stepped forward. She had the mind of a scientist and found the right words. She explained that humans evolved differently than Velkari did. The Velkari developed on a paradise world without predators, without harsh seasons, without constant threats. But Earth was different. Danger was everywhere. Myra rolled up her own sleeves, showing her own scars. Every human they would meet had marks like these. Some from accidents, some from deliberate conflict, some from just living on a dangerous world. Humans carried them because they had to adapt to survive. The door opened again. This time it was Commander Hana, the chief engineer, along with 2 more crew members. Word had spread through the human group about what was happening. Now they came with their own stories to share. Hana approached the circle of Velkari children. She asked if she could join this lesson. Rila looked at Doyen, who nodded. The child said please. For the next 3 hours, the Velkari children listened as human after human shared their stories. Not just the violence and danger, but the context, the reasons, the aftermath. They learned about Hana's scar from a shuttle crash that killed her co-pilot, but left her alive. They learned about Yuna's radiation burns from when she used her own body to shield a reactor breach. They learned about Jiho's rebuilt leg from a ground assault that saved a colony. Through it all, the children's skin cycled through colors the humans had never seen before. New patterns were forming as new understanding grew in their minds. Finally, as the session was ending, Young Vex asked the question that had been building in all their minds. He addressed all the humans. He said they spoke of these wounds as survival, but Velkari would call them trauma. Among his people, such experiences would need years of psychological healing. How did humans function after going through so much? The humans looked at each other. Captain Ji-hoon answered. He had arrived during the middle of the stories. He said quietly that humans did require healing. Psychological, emotional, sometimes spiritual. The scars on their bodies were only the visible marks. The invisible ones ran deeper. But humans had learned over thousands of years that the key was not avoiding trauma. It was processing it, integrating it, learning from it. Humans carried their scars not as burdens but as evidence that they endured. Ji-hoon rolled up his own sleeves. His arms were so covered with scars that they formed a tapestry. He said every human was a survivor of something. That was what made them human. The Velkari children were silent for a long moment. Then Rila stood and did something unprecedented. She reached out and gently touched Doyun's scarred arm. She said thank you. Her skin shimmered with a color somewhere between respect and sorrow. She thanked them for showing their truth. The other children followed. Each one touched the arm of a different human. It was a gesture their species only used with family members. Myra watched with tears in her eyes. This was more than sharing information. It was the first real bridge between two species who could not be more different. But as the children left to return to their rooms, Doyun felt a weight on his shoulders. They had opened the door to understanding. But they had also revealed the basic truth about humanity. They were survivors in a galaxy that did not yet understand what that meant, and the real lessons were only beginning. 3 days later, Ambassador Thelios stood in Captain Ji-hoon's office. Thelios was very tall, even for a Velkari. He stood over 2 meters high. His body was rigid with tension. His skin glowed with deep red patterns. The translation system said this meant grave concern. He spoke with a voice that sounded like wind blowing through crystal caves. Thelios said his daughter had not been sleeping well since the humans started these demonstrations. She was having nightmares. This was something she had never experienced before. Ji-hoon remained sitting behind his desk. His hands were folded calmly. He said he understood the concern. However, Rila had come to Doyun on her own. She asked questions and he answered truthfully. Thelios repeated the word truthfully. His skin flashed orange. Yes, he had heard the recordings. His daughter now understood that humans regularly experienced violence, that they carried weapons, that they had fought wars not just with other species but with each other. For thousands of years. Ji-hoon noted that all of this was part of their initial cultural briefings. Thelios said facts were different. Data points in a report were very different from seeing physical evidence marked on living flesh. His people did not understand this. How could humans function as a civilization while carrying such trauma? A voice came from the doorway. It said the same way the Velkari functioned while lacking context to understand danger. Doyun stood at the entrance with Myra beside him. Ji-hoon waved them in. Thelios said stiffly that his daughter spoke of Doyun with something close to worship. She said he was brave and strong, but Thelios wondered if Doyun understood what he had done to her worldview. Doyun replied that he had shown her the truth about humanity. Doyun entered the room. He said that Thelios's people had invited humans into this exchange to build understanding between their species, but understanding required honesty. The Velkari wanted to know what made humans good explorers, why humans thrived in dangerous places, why humans survived in regions of space that other species avoided. The answer was written on their skin. Thelios said it was written in scars, written in evidence of violence and pain. His people valued harmony. They had built a civilization across 17 star systems without a single war, without conflict beyond talking and debating, and now his daughter asked him why the Velkari were so weak compared to humans. The room fell silent. Myra stepped forward. She asked if she could speak. She said she had studied both species extensively. The Velkari were not weak. They had achieved technological wonders that humans were still trying to understand. Their mastery of quantum communications, their biotechnology, their social unity. These were amazing achievements. Thelios said that was true. But the Velkari could not fight. Not the way humans could fight. Thelios explained that Velkari nervous systems rebelled against causing harm. Their psychology could not imagine sustained conflict. They thought this made them evolved, advanced. But now things were different. Ji-hoon finished his thought. Now the Velkari had met a species that survived by different rules, and it was forcing them to reconsider what advanced meant. Thelios's skin shifted to something complex, mixing several colors at once. He said 3 weeks ago, he would have said the Velkari represented the ideal path of evolution. Peace, cooperation, technological advancement without destruction. But the galaxy was larger than they knew. They had met 6 species since achieving faster-than-light travel. All peaceful. All similar to them in temperament. And then they met humans. Thelios moved to the window looking out at the stars. He said humanity terrified his people, not because humans were cruel or aggressive by nature, but because they were capable of both extreme violence and extreme compassion. Humans could kill without hesitation and die to save strangers. They carried the capacity for war in their biology, yet they chose diplomacy. This contradiction was difficult to understand. Ji-hoon said it made humans unpredictable. Thelios corrected him. It made humans dangerous. His government was debating whether this alliance was wise. There were groups who believed humans would inevitably bring conflict to their peaceful sectors. That human nature would contaminate their way of life. Myra said quietly that perhaps they were right. Everyone turned to stare at her. Myra met their gazes steadily. She clarified, not about bringing conflict, but about changing their way of life. She said Thelios's species had been remarkably fortunate. They evolved on a paradise world and met only other peaceful species. But the galaxy was vast. Statistically, eventually, they would encounter something that did not share their values, something that viewed their pacifism as weakness rather than strength. Thelios said they had defensive systems, shields, deterrents. Doyen said these systems were designed by species who had never fought. He did not mean to sound harsh, but he had reviewed their defensive protocols. They were based on the assumption that any attacker would respond to logic and proportional response. They did not account for an enemy that did not care about its own losses. That viewed Velkari existence as a threat. That fought not for resources but for ideology or survival. Thelios asked if such species existed. His skin flickered with what might have been fear. Ji-hoon said yes, they did. Humanity had encountered 3 of them. Humans were still here. Those other species were not. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Thelios whispered that humans had committed genocide. His entire form went dim. Ji-hoon said firmly that was not correct. They fought extinction wars. There was a difference. In each case, humans attempted communication, negotiation, even retreat. In each case, the aggressor species made it clear that humanity's complete destruction was their only goal. So humans made a different choice, their extinction or humanity's. Humans chose survival. Thelios asked if they wore those choices on their skin too. Not the physical scars, but the psychological ones. Ji-hoon acknowledged this. Every human carried them. The weight of survival, the knowledge of what they were capable of when pushed. It was not something they celebrated, but it was part of who they were. Thelios was quiet for a long time. His skin cycled through colors that had no easy translation. Finally, he spoke. He said his daughter had asked him something last night. She asked if the Velkari would survive if they met a species like the ones that attacked humanity. He did not have an answer for her. Doyen said the honest answer was probably not. Not without help. Not without changing some basic aspects of their biology and culture, and that was a heavy burden to place on a child. Myra added that it was necessary, though, because ignorance would not protect them. The galaxy did not care whether they were prepared for it or not. Thelios turned from the window. He said then perhaps this exchange was more important than he had realized, not just to build friendship between their peoples, but to learn from humans, to understand how a species survived when survival required compromise. Ji-hoon repeated the word compromise. That was one word for it. He asked Doyen what he would call it. Doyen looked down at his exposed arms at the map of scars that told his life story. He said finally that he would call it adaptation. Humans adapted to danger, to loss, to circumstances that should break them. They broke a little, yes, but they healed. They learned. They became harder to break the next time. Thelios asked if the Velkari could learn to adapt this way. Myra said that was not for them to answer, but they could show the Velkari what adaptation looked like, what it cost, what it earned. The rest was up to them. The ambassador's skin gradually shifted toward a clearer blue. He said he had come here to protest, to demand they stop showing his people their scars. But he realized now that would be closing the barn door after the horse had left. Jihoon said with a slight smile that was close enough. Thelios said his daughter could not unsee what she had learned. Neither could the other children. Neither could he. Then they should see it all. The full truth of humanity. Not just the scars, but the context. The history. The choices that led to them. If the Velkhari were to survive in this larger, more dangerous galaxy, they must understand what survival truly meant. Jihoon asked if he was certain. Some of human history was difficult, even for humans to confront. Thelios said he was certain that ignorance was more dangerous than knowledge, however painful. His people had lived in innocence long enough. He asked them to show the Velkhari what it meant to be survivors. After Thelios left, the three humans remained in the office. The weight of what they had agreed to hung heavy in the air. Myra said they had just agreed to show them everything. The wars, the genocides, the internal conflicts, all of it, Jihoon agreed. Doyen pointed out this could destroy the alliance. Jihoon countered that it could also strengthen it. The captain said the ambassador was right about one thing. The galaxy was bigger and more dangerous than the Velkhari knew. If humans hid their nature from them, they were just delaying the inevitable revelation. Better they learned now, while humans could provide context, than discovered it later when they needed humans most. Doyen looked down at his arms again. Each scar a chapter. Each mark a lesson learned in blood and pain and survival. He said they would start at the beginning. They would tell them about Earth. The ship's main meeting hall had been changed into a theater. 200 Velkhari sat in curved rows facing a stage with holograms. They ranged from children like Rila to elders whose skin had faded to pale colors with age. Every Velkhari on the ship had chosen to come. The human crew only numbered 48, but all of them stood along the back wall. They were a silent reminder of what was about to be revealed. Myra stood at the speaking platform with a computer pad in her hand. Beside her, a hologram showed Earth rotating slowly. It was blue and green and beautiful against the black of space. Myra began. She said this was their homeworld, Earth. By galactic standards, it was a relatively young planet, 4.5 billion years old. Life started about 3.8 billion years ago. And for most of that time, survival meant one thing: adaptation to an environment that actively tried to kill you. The hologram shifted, showing tiny organisms. Myra explained that early life on Earth faced constant threats. Temperature extremes ranging from -80 to +60 degrees. Air that would be poison to most modern species. Natural disasters like volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, ice ages, and mass extinctions. 5 major extinction events happened before humanity even evolved. Each time, life continued not through harmony but through competition and adaptation. The Velkhari audience was silent. Their skin shifted through uncertain patterns. Myra continued. The ancestors of modern humans appeared about 6 million years ago. They were not the strongest species on their planet, not the fastest, not the most durable, but they had 3 advantages: opposable thumbs, complex language, and an unusually large brain that let them plan, cooperate, and learn from each other's experiences. The hologram showed early humans around a fire, simple tools in their hands. Even with these advantages, survival was never guaranteed. Early humans faced predators that saw them as food: cave bears, saber-toothed cats, large reptiles, even other competing human-like species. Humans survived by becoming what was called persistence hunters. They could not outrun their prey or overpower it with strength, so they developed endurance. Myra explained that humans could track an animal for days, pushing it to exhaustion. They learned to use tools, to work in groups, to plan ambushes and coordinate attacks. An elderly Velkhari named Kelros spoke up. His skin showed distress. He said humans became predators. Myra acknowledged this. Yes, but also prey. That was the crucial difference between Earth and the Velkhari homeworld. On Earth, every species existed in a web of violence: predator and prey, parasite and host, competitor and competitor. Humans were not unique in their capacity for violence. They were unique in their capacity to understand and harness it, while also going beyond it. The hologram advanced through human history: agriculture, cities, civilizations rising and falling. As humans developed civilization, Myra said, their greatest threat became other humans. different tribes competing for resources, different cultures with incompatible beliefs, different nations with conflicting interests. For thousands of years, human history could be summarized as a cycle of cooperation and conflict. They built together and destroyed each other in equal measure. Images flickered across the hologram. Ancient battles, medieval sieges, colonial conquests, industrial warfare. Doyen stepped forward to join Myra. The scars on his arms were visible. He said these scars were recent and personal. But every human carried ancestral scars too. Genetic memories of survival. Human bodies produced adrenaline in response to threats, a chemical that increased strength and speed but also clouded judgment. Human brains were wired to identify us versus them, to form tribes and defend territories. Human hands could create art or weapons with equal skill. He rolled up his sleeves again, showing his scars to everyone. But humans were also capable of incredible kindness. Humans would die to save strangers. They would sacrifice their own well-being for abstract ideas like justice or freedom. They created art, music, literature, philosophy. They loved deeply and grieved deeply. The same species that invented warfare also invented medicine, democracy, and the concept of universal human rights. Rila stood up from her seat in the front row. She asked if humans knew violence was destructive. Why did they continue to engage in it? Captain Jihoon answered. He moved to stand beside Doyen. He said sometimes the alternative was worse. He would tell them about the Mars reconstruction. That was where many of them earned their scars. The hologram shifted to show Mars, the red planet that had become humanity's second home. 60 years ago, Jihoon explained, humans began changing Mars to make it livable. It was supposed to be a new beginning, a chance to build a civilization without Earth's historical problems. For 30 years it worked. 8 million people lived on Mars in domed cities connected by underground tunnels. They grew food, did research, raised families. It was peaceful. The hologram showed thriving cities under protective domes, children playing in parks with plants from Earth. Then the autonomy movement began. A political group wanted Mars to declare independence from Earth. At first, it was peaceful protests and democratic debate, but extremists took over the movement. They believed the only way to achieve true independence was to make the Martian colonies unlivable for Earth loyalists. The hologram darkened. Explosions ripped through domed cities. Bodies floated in the empty space of breached habitats. Several Velkari children turned away. Their skin flickered with distress. But their parents held them gently, their skin firm with determination. They had asked to see this. They would not look away, Jihoon continued. The extremists targeted life support systems, air processors, water recyclers, power generation. In 3 days, they killed 2 million people. Men, women, children. It did not matter to them. They wanted to send a message. Ambassador Thelios asked quietly what they did. Jihoon said they responded, not with revenge, but with rescue and reconstruction. Jihoon had been stationed on Mars as a young officer. For 2 years, his unit worked all day and night to repair damaged systems, evacuate survivors, and hunt down the extremists. They lost people. Many people. Every person in this room who served on Mars carried scars from that time, physical and mental. He paused and rolled up his own sleeves. Unlike the younger crew, his arms were covered in burn scars that formed patterns like melted wax. Jihoon said he got these when Dome 6 collapsed. He was leading a rescue operation when the extremists set off a final bomb. The blast melted his environmental suit. He should have died. But his team got him to medical in time. They saved his life. He spent the next year in regeneration therapy. These scars were what remained after their best medical technology. Thelios pressed. He asked what happened to the extremists. Taehyun stepped forward. He said they captured most of them, tried them in court, sentenced them according to law. Some died in the fighting, but they did not attack the civilian population that had supported the autonomy movement. They distinguished between those who wanted political change and those who chose terrorism. Myra added that Mars was independent now. Humans granted their autonomy 10 years after the reconstruction ended, because the goal was never to punish an entire population for the actions of extremists. The goal was survival and, eventually, healing. The hologram showed modern Mars with rebuilt domes, memorials to the dead, and a thriving independent society with strong ties to Earth. Doyen said this was what human survival looked like. It was violent. It was painful. It was messy and complicated and filled with moral uncertainty. Humans made mistakes. They hurt each other. But they also rebuilt. They adapted. They learned. They created systems for justice and reconciliation. They carried their scars and remembered what the scars taught them. Rila stood again. She asked if Doyen could remove his scars, would he? The question silenced the hall. Doyen looked down at his arms, at the map of his life written in scar tissue. Then he looked at Jihoon, at Taehyun, at Myra, at all his fellow crew members. One by one, they rolled up their sleeves in a silent gesture of unity. Doyen said no. He would not remove them. These scars were proof that he lived, that he fought, that he survived. Without them, he would not be the person standing here today. And that person, flawed and scarred as he was the only version of him that existed. He had made peace with that. Another Velkari child asked about the pain. Did not the memories hurt? Jihoon answered yes. Sometimes they did. But pain was part of memory, and memory was how humans learned. If they forgot their pain, they would repeat the mistakes that caused it. Humans did not seek out suffering, but when it found them, they integrated it. They made it part of their story. Ambassador Thelio stood. His tall form drew every eye. His skin had settled into a pattern, the hum steady deep purple with threads of silver. He said he was beginning to understand. The Velkari had no scars because they had never faced circumstances that would create them. Their peace was not a choice born of wisdom, but an accident of fortunate evolution and sheltered history. While humans chose peace despite knowing war, Doyen finished his thought. That was the difference. The Velkari had never had to choose. Humans chose every day, and these scars reminded them why. The hall was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, one of the Velkari elders stood. Then another. Then another. Soon, every Velkari in the hall was standing, their skin sin. 3 weeks had passed since the history lesson. The ship had moved into orbit around a neutral world. This world was chosen as the place for the first joint human-Velkari research station. But the mood on the ship had changed dramatically. The Velkari children no longer stayed away from the human crew. Instead, they looked for them, asking questions that grew more and more complex. Not just about scars and survival, but about choice, morality, courage, and what it meant to live knowing that peace was temporary. Doyen found Rila in the observation area again. This time she had a computer showing images of human soldiers throughout history. She was studying them with intense focus. Doyen asked if it was a research project. She jumped slightly. Her skin flickered with surprise, then settled into thoughtful orange. She said she was trying to understand something. These soldiers all chose to fight. Why? Doyen sat beside her. He said different reasons. Some believed in defending their homes. Some fought for ideals. Some had no choice, forced by their governments. And some just wanted to protect the people beside them. That was what he fought for. Not for governments or ideologies, but for the crew members who depended on him. Rila said, like his squad on Mars. The ones he saved in the coolant accident. Doyen confirmed, and the one he could not save. Rila's skin shifted to that grief blue color. She asked if it still hurt thinking about him. Doyen admitted it did. Every day. His name was Kyungmin. He was 24 years old, engaged to be married, and he told terrible jokes that somehow always made people laugh. Doyen thought about what he might have become if he had lived. The children he might have had. The life he was denied. Rila asked why that made him sad. He survived. Doyen explained that survivor's guilt was real. Sometimes he wondered if he could have moved faster, thought smarter, been better. He carried the weight of Kyungmin's lost future along with his own scars. The child was quiet for a moment. Then she asked if that was why humans were so strong, because they carried each other's pain. Doyen thought about this. Maybe. Humans remembered their dead. They honored them by continuing to live, by trying to make their sacrifice mean something. It was not strength so much as persistence. They endured because giving up would dishonor those who could not. A sound rang throughout the ship. Captain Jihoon's voice came over the speakers. All crew and guests should report to the main hall. They had received a message from the Velkari government. Ambassador Thelios requested everyone's presence. Doyen and Rila looked at each other, then made their way to the hall together. The hall was packed. Every human and Velkari on the ship had gathered. Ambassador Thelios stood at the platform. His skin showed a pattern none of the humans had seen before. Deep blue with silver and gold, pulsing in a complex rhythm, Thelios began. He said for the past month they had engaged in an unprecedented exchange. The Velkari came to this ship believing they understood humanity. They did not. They saw human technology, diplomatic protocols, and scientific achievements, but they failed to see the foundation upon which all of those things were built. He gestured to the humans standing along the back wall. The humans had shown them their scars. They explained their meaning. They demonstrated that humanity's greatest strength came not from avoiding hardship but from surviving it and learning from it. This revelation had caused deep debate within the Velkari collective. The humans tensed. This could go either way. Thelios continued. There were groups who feared humans, who argued that alliance with humanity would corrupt their peaceful nature, who believed human capacity for violence represented a threat. These concerns had merit. Doyen felt his heart sinking. However, Thelios said, his skin brightening, there were also those who recognized a basic truth. The galaxy did not care about their preferences. For thousands of years, the Velkari had existed in a bubble of safety, surrounded by species as peaceful as themselves. But statistical analysis suggested this was unusual. The galaxy was vast. Probability said that eventually they would encounter threats they could not negotiate with or understand. He paused, letting the meaning sink in. 3 days ago, long-range sensors detected a signal from a previously unexplored sector. The signal matched no known pattern. It did not respond to attempts at communication, and it was moving toward Velkari space at a speed that suggested intentional direction. The Velkari in the audience erupted in patterns of shock and fear. Even the children's skin flickered with alarm. Thelios said they did not know what it was. It might be harmless. It might be a natural thing they had simply never seen. Or it might be the very threat they had never had to face before. Captain Jihoon stepped forward. He asked if Thelios had requested human help. Thelios said yes. The collective government had authorized him to formally request that humanity provide defensive advice, and if necessary, military support. They were unprepared for this scenario. Jihoon said immediately that they would help, but Myra stood up. Her face showed she was troubled. She said they should discuss this. The Velkari were asking them to potentially introduce warfare into their society. That was not a decision to make lightly. Doyen surprised everyone by agreeing. He said she was right. He told Thelios that the ambassador needed to understand what he was asking. If humans helped them prepare for conflict, they would change Velkari society fundamentally. They would need to develop weapons, train soldiers, build military infrastructure. The Velkari might never be the same. Thelios's skin pulsed with complex emotions. He said they knew. The debate within the collective had been painful. Some argued they should maintain their pacifism regardless of the cost, that death was preferable to corruption of their values. Jihoon asked gently what Thelios argued. The ambassador said he argued that pacifism was only meaningful if it was a choice. If they lacked the capacity for defense, their peace was not virtue but helplessness. He had watched this crew show their scars and explain what each one meant. Humans chose peace despite knowing war. That was true strength. That was what the Velkari must learn. Rila suddenly stood. She asked if she could speak. Thelios looked surprised but nodded. The small child walked to the front of the hall. Her skin shifted through patterns of nervousness and determination. She said she had asked Doyen what was under his sleeves. He showed her his scars. At first, she was frightened, but then she understood. These scars did not make humans violent. They made humans survivors. If the Velkari were to survive in a galaxy that might hurt them, they needed to learn what these scars taught. She turned to face Doyen directly. She asked if he would teach survivors like him. The question hung in the air. Every eye in the hall fixed on Doyen. He looked at his crew members, at Jihoon, at Myra, at Taehyun. He saw understanding in their eyes. This was bigger than one mission. This was about the future of two species. Doyen said carefully that survival was not something learned from lessons. It was something experienced. And he hoped deeply that she would never have to experience what the... But if they must, Doyen knelt to her level as he had that first day. Then yes, he said, they would teach them. Not just how to fight, but why to fight. Not just how to survive, but what to survive for. They would show the Velkari how humans chose peace every day despite knowing war. And maybe, together, they would find a way for the Velkari to remain who they were while gaining the capacity to defend what they valued. He stood and addressed the entire room. But they needed to understand. If humans taught them, they would change. They would gain scars, physical and mental. They would lose some of their innocence. And they would carry the weight of knowing what they were capable of. That was the price of survival. Thelio said they understood, and they chose to learn. 6 months later, the joint research station was complete. But it was more than a scientific place now. It was a training ground. Velkari and humans worked side by side, the peaceful species learning from the survivors. Not just military tactics, but the philosophy behind them, the ethics of force, the psychology of conflict, the importance of proportional response and restraint. The unknown signal turned out to be a damaged exploration ship from a previously unknown species, the Karathi. They were neither hostile nor peaceful, simply lost and damaged. Human Velkari cooperation successfully rescued them and established first contact with their civilization. But the incident had created change. The Velkari would never be purely pacifist again. They were developing defensive capabilities, training security forces, building military infrastructure, and they were gaining scars. Doyen stood in the training facility watching a group of young Velkari practice combat simulation. Rila was among them. Her movements were awkward but determined. She spotted him and ran over. Her skin was bright with excitement. She held out her arm. There on her see-through skin was a small scar. Just a thin line from a training accident. By human standards, it was nothing. But for a Velkari, it was revolutionary. She said it was her first scar. Their medical technology could remove it, but she asked them to leave it, like he taught them. It was proof that she was learning to survive. Doyen felt a complex mix of pride and sorrow. He asked how she felt. Rila's skin shifted through several colors before settling on something new. A color that had not existed in the Velkari spectrum before their encounter with humanity. Something that might